Walk the Talk America presents Guns and Mental Health, a podcast for firearms owners, clinicians, and the curious public.
What is up, listening audience? We are back live. Today, I am joined by my co host, Kevin Berry. Kevin, how are you doing?
Doing good.
Hanging in there. We both have back issues. We're getting old.
We are.
Yeah. I hurt my back yesterday. Kevin hurt his back playing basketball, which is beyond what are you trying to prove, Kevin? That's
Just trying to get a little cardio late at night with young kids. You're doing some electrical work. I think yours is more deserved.
right. Yeah. But that problem, though, is I wish I was like hurting my back playing basketball these days. I'm hurting my back now, like trying to move a dresser so I can get to a GFI outlet. Like, you know, Dwayne, any back issues?
Oh man, listen, I tell you, you know, back in the day, I'd hurt my back like doing burpees, in the morning at like 6 o'clock and whatnot. Now it's like you bend down the wrong way to tie your shoelace, and it's just weird, man. So, I go to a chiropractor once every 2 months just to make sure I maintain, and that helps me kind of like not have back issues now. So, but I got to be proactive about it at this point.
I got to do this. I got to get back to the chiropractor. I've been lucky. I haven't done it in a long time. And of course, I thought it's behind me. I lost a lot of weight, got back in shape, and I was just like, this will never happen again. And
Yeah,
yesterday was a reminder that, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But Dwayne Edwards, welcome to the show.
glad to be here.
So Dwayne and I met at MCon, which is a military conference in Vegas. How would you describe that, Dwayne? It reminds me a lot of like Freedom Fest, or there's just organizations from all over. I mean, there's everything from like I saw fake
Yeah.
astroturf companies to alternative medicine companies for veterans. Would that be the best way to describe it? It's got everything.
No, I think that's great, man. Well, first off, Mike, Kevin, thanks for having me. Thrilled to be on the show. You all doing remarkable work. MCon, I think a good way to describe MCon is it's a celebration of military culture, right? I think and the many different parts of us that comes into that culture. So we're not one noted, right? And so you got folks that are talking about, guns and mental health. You got folks talking about, MMA, folks talking about, taking retreats and, cool clothing. And so you got a bunch of different ways that we can kind of engage as a veteran, or some folks are still in the military. And so instead of, what happens a lot of times when you're, either transition and leave the service, you have to suppress this part of who you are. And I think what MCon is, what I like about what Waco and team have done is that no, let's not suppress who we are. Let's come together annually and let's celebrate what has made us who we are now, the good, the bad, the ugly, all that stuff. And let's move forward as a team. So it's a really great kind of celebration of what has helped kind of, form military culture and veteran identity. That's my kind of high level view of, MCon.
Yeah, I really liked it. We get a lot of calls from active duty military and veterans, people that reach out that are curious about, say, I don't know, like, you know, psilocybin therapy, things like that, where they don't, in their whole life, it's like counterintuitive to talk about these things because, everyone always said drugs are bad, right? And,
Yeah.
when I went to MCon, you see the people that do the ketamine therapy there, you see the people that do the psilocybin retreats. And that's a perfect place for veterans, I think, and active duty military, and just people that are part of the culture. Say you're adjacent to the military, you're married to somebody in the military, like to walk around and find out information that could help you in the future. But what was your military experience, just so the audience understands where you're
Yeah.
coming from? You were in the Marine Corps, correct?
That's right. So I spent about seven years in the Marine Corps, year and a half reserve, and so they say once a Marine, always a Marine, and so it's kind of hard to shake, the that kind of the Marine juice in your veins and whatnot. And so even the way you say Marine Corps is like a certain way that Marines say Marine Corps. Any Marines could appreciate that. So I started out as a ground intelligence officer, and so I spent a tour in the infantry, and then my last kind of role was in a core intelligence role in the DC capital region area, and so I was you know kind of a we call a MAGTAF. So I was a general intelligence officer for a agency right there on Quantico, and so it's a Marine Corps intelligence activity. And so during that time, I got a chance to do a good bit of a rotation in a bunch of places in the DC capital region area, which was neat, right? For me, I got a chance to see what it's like to be, on the ground side, overseas in Iraq. And then I got a chance to come back and then leverage what I learned and being closest to the ground to then support decision makers from more of a, how do we support those folks on the ground standpoint. So it gave me, Mike, I love that question because what it gave me was, it really honed my leadership philosophy, right? I think a lot of leaders, it can be easy to sit in cushy offices and make decisions, but it's really important to ensure that you understand, how that decision impacts the people closest to either the customer, closest to the process, closest to whatever it is. And so I think that experience framed a lot of kind of how I think about this leadership and as a whole. But I think a key piece about that also is that I was also a suicide awareness officer, for that command. So I did that for maybe a couple years, and so it was it was eye opening because that was my first time, feeling the dissonance of, you know, speaking with hardened warriors who we've trained to go do some amazing things for our country. We need them to be trained to do those things so they can be, tough and be able to execute, but also be able to flip and help them understand that the someone thinking about hurting themselves isn't a sign of weakness, it's a cry for help, right? And then having to navigate through that was my first kind of window in to being able to navigate through that. And I'll be honest with you, there was a lot of that was still peripheral for me because I was still in, and I had to go through my own mental health journey, right? And so, but there was a calling to be able to do that. There's a recognition, and since then I've kind of grown a bit, and we all do. But I think that was the one piece I want to kind of share about my military experience.
Yeah. So you be like, was that even something on your radar? Like for me, like I became the guns and mental health, like suicide prevention guy by default. And I think it's just because our industry had zero attention to it. And I was the one that was the loudest about it, but I had no idea. I'm not an expert in that. Like when you got that bestowed on you, like,
Yeah,
hey, Dwayne, this is who you're going to be. Was that something that was like near and dear to your heart? I mean, even if you're not experienced in having suicidal ideation, or everybody's touched by suicide at some point in their
yeah.
life, right? But not people don't necessarily like run towards it and want to help people. Was that something that they were just like, you're going to do this, or did you start to be like, wait, there's something wrong here? I think I could be instrumental in fixing this issue or addressing this issue.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. I mean, a lot of time things get issued to you like, hey, you're gonna go do this and go march on. So it wasn't one of those things. um so my wife at the time was getting her PhD in psychology,
Hmm.
right? And so I in undergrad I got it was a it's called philosophy, politics, and law, which is really you can't really do anything with it, but you could read, write, and think. And so that was my undergraduate degree. But I did take a bunch of classes in psychology in undergrad, and so I had a passion for it, right? But I didn't understand where to go or what to do with it. And so there was a period of time when for some reason I'm trying to remember exactly how that how that opportunity came up. But I think they were just asking for people to volunteer for this role. We need someone. We need a company grade officer to kind of stand up to take this role. And you know, I, I felt with my exposure with seeing and knowing what my wife is doing in psychology, and also thinking about I think I understood that mental health was important. I think I understood that we need to find a way to communicate. I think there's a calling there, but I'll be honest with you, Mike. I don't know exactly in retrospect what was the driving force that made me say I'm going to go do this thing. I'm gonna go charge this hill. I think it was just there was something there, some desire to be able to drive change, and where that came from is hard to know what that where that was. But as I kind of look back in retrospect now, I kind of see a through line, which is kind of interesting to see where we are now. But I guess there's some sort of calling, some sort of desire to drive change and to support our warriors uh, on a deeper level.
Right, and I want to get into that and what you do now because it's fascinating. But what was the upbringing like for you? Like, how did you come up? How did you end up in the military?
Yeah, man, that's a loaded question. So I was born in Jamaica, and you're gonna get the full story now. So
We want it. That's it. We want the full story.
I was born in Jamaica, the island, and so I came to New York, America when I was 5. Lived in Brooklyn, and when I first came to this country, we were poor. We were on welfare. I was walking out to the store with the WIC checks and all that. And so, and I, walked through Brownsville was a pretty tough neighborhood, still is, but at the time I think it was 80s. It was a little different, right? And so I got a chance to, I was lucky I was able to kind of navigate through that. Um, I was fortunate enough that a teacher, recognized me in uh, middle school and said, "Hey, this kid should, take a test to see if he can qualify to go to a private school." At the time, New York City had this initiative where they would find inner city kids who were doing well, who would then take them out of the school they were in and give them opportunities, scholarships to go to a private school. And so it turns out I tested really well and I was able. And so the school said, "Hey, he should go to this kind of school." So that I think changed my trajectory kind of quite a bit because it took me from where I was at the time and exposed me to a school that's near and dear to my heart now called Berkeley Carroll, which is in downtown Brooklyn, New York. And so that kind of broadened my perspective. It kind of really forced me to see, like, really, I was living in Little Jamaica, in Brooklyn at the time, and then now I was in, going to school with kids that families lived in brownstones and whatnot. And for those that don't know, brownstones are pretty expensive historic properties in New York. And so that kind of pushed me to kind of start seeing the world a little differently. And then went to undergrad in SUNY Binghamton. I think what happened, Mike and Kevin, is that as I was getting older, maybe wiser, my desire to be able to do things differently only got stronger. And so there was a point in time when it was 2005, and I thought about joining the Marine Corps years ago, back even before college, and I didn't. And after college, I was teaching, I was doing real estate, doing a whole bunch of things, and but nothing felt fulfilling. And I remember thinking back and saying, when I'm 70, looking back at my life, would I regret not joining the Marine Corps? The answer was yes. Like, I knew I'd regret that. And so I stopped everything. I went back to the recruiter, said, "Hey, I want to figure this out." And so I was a little plump back then. And so I had to get some pull-ups, do some running. I had to train to get my body, my mind right. And so finally I did, and I left. But I'll tell you what was challenging at the time, and not as challenging now, is that my family has been impacted by mental health, right? And so that was a big reason that I wanted to leave and needed to leave. And so for me, the Marine Corps was twofold. A lot of people, a lot of us, military, Air Force, Army, whatever it is, some of us joined for God, country, and all those great things. A lot of us joined because we're maybe we're looking for something different, right? we're looking for something different, and we need a way to get there. And so that's what the Marine Corps was for me initially. It was, I need something different from what I see in front of me. And while going through OCS, I think what the Marine Corps does a great job of helping you fall in love with the ethos, fall in love with the warriors before you, fall in love with the mission. And then you're able to then become and think about God, country, core, all those things. But for me, when I first joined, it was really about, I need a I need a I need something that's different. I need something fulfilling. I need my life to be about more. And so that's how I got there. Man, how long was
Interesting.
that? I felt like I was talking for a long time.
Hey, no, we love that on this show. Like the best guests are the ones that you just let them go and they go. So no, you're good. No, I'm always fascinated to hear people's journey into the military, right? Because obviously some people go in because it's just like, hey, we've had guests that are like, I grew up in a trailer park and I didn't stand a chance. It was a way out. And then other
Yep.
people are, I've had other friends. We have a member named Jose Fierro, who was a Marine Corps pilot, and for him, he wanted to fly and serve his country. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He went to Stanford and then went in the Marine Corps. And I remember when he told me he was going to the Marine Corps, I was like, "Are you crazy?" You know what I mean? Because I'm like, "You're Stanford educated. Like, no one goes into the Marine Corps like that, But he did it and he loved it, and it's part of who he is. And it's always fascinating to hear people's journey in this
Yeah.
space. So you go through.
And I'll say this, Mike, and I owe so much of who I am right now because of the Marine Corps.
Mm,
And so it's interesting to see that, like, I didn't know what I was doing at the time going in. Maybe I did, I don't know, maybe there's something subconscious and that drew me, this attracted me there. But so much of who I am now, discipline, drive, my ability to be able to just dig in and just not quit, or just put in the 80, 90, 100, whatever hours needed to get something done. Like, Marine Corps helped me recognize I can do that, right? And so much of where I am now is a function of just who I became through the Marine Corps, which I'm eternally grateful for.
so, but you're like in Iraq, right? At some point in your life, like, do you ever look around and go, what did I do? Like, I was a special kid. They bused me to the good school. Like, no, I mean this. I heard stories over there, and it's just.
Oh man.
I mean, you're more of a man than I am. You know what I mean?
Ah,
Like,
man, we all serve in different ways, man. We all do. I'll tell you. So, funny story. I used to, my alarm, back when I was, sleeping inside and whatnot. My alarm was, uh, Hard Knock Life, Jay Z, and so that's why I woke up every morning. Oh man,
that's
give me.
awesome. No, but I
um,
mean, you
yeah,
obviously saw
yeah,
bad things, and it's like, are you ready to process those things? I always wonder what it's like
yeah.
when the person actually gets over there. They're like sitting in that heat. You know what I mean? Um,
You know what? I a lot of In many ways, when you're over there, life is simplified, right? And so, man, you got me tearing up over that, going over there thing. And so, um, I my job, sure, I had missions and things we were doing, but my number one job, along with the mission, I remember, was to bring my Marines home, right? And so, back when so I graduated infantry officer course in 2008, and I picked up a unit. It was a reserve unit that I picked up, and they were just being activated, and so we're taking them over to 29 Palms. I remember there was a dad when we were first flying out, and the dad came up to me and said, "Hey, bring my son home," you know, and I promised I'll bring his son home. And so, at the end of the day, we when we get over there, especially when you have, like, folks responsible for the like my job was to be able to make sure they were trained and ready for whatever missions in front of them, and that they would come home. And so, and we were fortunate that every single one of them during that time did. And so, um, that's what I'm most proud of. But yeah, there's sometimes you get over there, you're like, you think back, it's like, how did I get here? Sometimes, but you're so focused on the mission and what you're doing that that doesn't really creep in as much, because what you're thinking about is making sure you're doing your after actions after you come back in the wire from patrol. You're thinking about all the processes and things you need to tweak and update. You're reviewing intelligence to make sure you understand what happened, what changed the last time you left the wire. And so there's all these things that you have to do that, like, thinking about, and you know how you got here isn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a thing. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I was thrilled to get out there, because when I joined, and I joined when I was in OCS, I got told, because they do blood work and whatnot, and so I found out I had a sickle cell trait. And
Mm.
so the doctors told me, is like, hey, you won't be able to be in the infantry. And I was crushed, because like you joined the Marine Corps, and at the time that's all I wanted. And so being able to graduate IOC with a sickle cell trait, and still move forward and whatnot, was like a big thing for me. And so, like, I was thrilled to deploy. Like, that's why I joined. And so that was, but it still sucked. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was like, this, like, when you run to the suck, right? Like, the suck was a part of it. And so I never actually felt like, you know, um, that I can remember, at least, how the heck did I got here. It was just, I think we're just pretty focused.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I always am fascinated by that. I always like, to me, it's like you risk your life. I mean, for a lot of people, you don't know, right? And you're risking your life for this concept, freedom,
Mm,
country, and sometimes you might have to go over there and do and fight somebody that you probably could have a beer with and get along. I've
yeah,
always looked at that thing as like, it isn't easy. And then, they tell people that you got to go over there and do what you got to do. And this is a good segue into what you do now, but like, then you come home
yeah,
and they're like, yeah, hey man, we're done with you. Good job. You did what you're supposed to. You did what you're supposed to do. And now
yeah,
it's like, have fun trying to fit back into society again. Like, find your place, like go on and
yeah,
do other great things and represent the Marine Corps. Like, and I think that's like I said, it's good to segue to talk about where you're at now and what you're doing, because I think what you're doing is fascinating. So how was that transition like for you? And then break into,
yeah,
everything with the VMHA.
yeah. No, that's a great point. I think we do a great job of building. Um, Hold on a second. Get a quick tissue here.
I thought you had props like
Huh?
Carrot Top.
No, I wish, man. I thought I had tissues on my desk, but uh, I do not. So here we go. All right. Yeah. So I think you hit on something really, really well. So we do a great job, I think, and someone will say we need to be harder, stronger, faster, and sure, like I that's there's space for that. But we do a great job, I think, of training and building um, warriors, right? And so, and we need our warriors to go overseas and wherever they are and accomplish missions for national security, so that we can be safe and keep our place in the world, and whatnot. And that stuff makes a lot of sense. And where we need some space to improve significantly is, like, you know we're I'm still the same human, right? So you train me to go over there to do these things, and I come back home, and how do I unpack how I was, my like whatever I did, and who I am now, and how do I segue. So for me, I'll tell you, I was when I first got out. This is 2013. I was a captain. I was in intelligence, and then I was just trying to find a job. It was like, okay, I need to find a job because I have a wife and I have responsibility. I have a dog, and I gotta pay bills. And so what I didn't have a plan for was how to maintain my purpose, my identity, my community. And so it was just about find a job. And so I think that's one of the, I think we've gotten better about that now. Since there's been a bunch of, uh, I think, good programs focused on being able to help veterans transition. Um, but for me, look back and I now know that I was probably depressed, for a good portion of that time because I had a lot of responsibility, a lot of, from the either the financial side or from the people I was overseeing or the work I was doing. And then I was in Manhattan, my first job was like, nothing against this job. I think this, there's a role for everyone, but it's like my first job just didn't feel like it made sense for my capability. And
Hmm.
so there is just a dissonance there, right? There's like the things I know I can do, and then the things I'm doing. And then what was hard for me, I couldn't reconcile that. So I was in this constant state of dissonance. And so that state of dissonance led me down a pretty depressed place where I remember there was one time we were visiting my wife's grandmother. She was getting treatment in for cancer, unfortunately. And I remember sitting in the chair in a hotel room, and I was just like quiet, just like quiet. I wasn't saying anything. I was just, and I didn't know, but I was just like, I was in a very uncomfortable. I was probably angry and just depressed place, right? So that was a good portion of 2013, and then I finally changed jobs and I got a pay increase, which was great because I took a 50% pay cut leaving the military, which was significant. And so now I was able, since then I was like, I've been fighting to get my compensation, and I've done it since then. But that first couple years, Mike, was, and Kevin, it was rough. It was rough. And I think a big part of that was, not knowing that, my identity doesn't have to, I don't have to lose who I am to go into a new space, right? My title goes away, sure. I don't care about that. But I don't need to try to become something different. Your identity grows with you, right? When you first are born, you're someone's kid. And then maybe they have another kid, then you become, a brother or a sister, then you become a friend, you become, a student, maybe you become a teacher, that you become a father or a husband, whatever. But these are all ways your identity grows, right? It grows and molds with you over time. And I think the challenge with my transition at a time was that, I was taught, and I didn't have the wherewithal to understand it now, that okay, you need to shut that off and turn that on. And then like that's not the right answer, right? Like, you've got again, back to MCon, there are parts of the culture that were helpful, that helped me to get to where I am. It's not healthy to then shut everything off and say I need to become someone different. No, let's help people make sense of who they are, and then help them, mold it, right? So you're not in this job of having to become someone completely different. Mold who that, person is, to take on some new skills, some new traits. And maybe I'm not, maybe I'm not talking about, dropping grenades and things like that all the time. Like maybe to a certain group that's cool, but like I need to be able to adjust and mold. And so I think that was hard. And then the lack of community piece and not having an understanding how big community is for you at the time, because I'm very laser focused, right? And so for me it was like, I got to get a new job, I got to get a new place to live, and I got to start making money, and I got my focus was, I need to get my salary back up because I have responsibilities, want to start having kids, want to get a house. And so, but I wasn't focused on purpose and community as much because I didn't have, maybe I didn't have the guidance or the tools to recognize how important that was for me at the time. And so the first couple of years was kind of hard. I was able to get a mentor, and so that mentor helped me kind of make sense of my skill set, helped me to kind of expose me to different things. I then got my MBA, which was critical because up until that point, I'm a pretty ambitious dude. And so, but I wasn't good at telling my story, right? And so it's like, ambition, but you can't communicate. That's not a good combination. And so, being able to go to business school with a bunch of, seasoned executives and a bunch of other really great professors, it really helped me to round out my skill set, right? Because it helped me to recognize there's, oh, okay. So what I learned was leadership. I learned management, execution, prioritization. How to mitigate risk, and so I can now make sense of my military experience, and then I can understand how to make sense of what I was doing post military. I was experimenting and learning and trying to figure out how to grow and explore different spaces, and so business school was crucial for me. I think I owe a lot to business school because it really gave me a lot of great tools.
Where'd you go?
I went to Yale, so Yale Business
Look at
School.
you. Yale. We got another Jose on the show, Kevin. Congratulations. It's like Arizona State where I went, but a little different. Go ahead.
But I think that the key thing about my experience though is that, and this kind of connects with VMHA, is that the big piece that I learned at Yale was about balancing the needs of business and society, right? And that's part of the reason I went to Yale. I applied to a few schools, and quick fun story. When I first found out I got in, they had a Marine in the previous class call me at like 7 o'clock. I'm putting my first baby down. It was like he was less than a year, and this dude calls me like seven something at night, and I'm like, hello. He's like, hey, this is blah 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 from Yale, calling, you got in, and I'm like, what? Is this real? It's 7:30 p.m. Like, are you trying to prank me? Like, this isn't funny. This isn't a funny joke.
Maybe thought you worked during the day.
No, it makes sense now, but at the point I was like that's not cool, dude. And then when it finally sunk in, I shed some tears, man. I was like, for them to think about the experience of having another Marine call me to let me know that. And at the time, man, I tell you, the time it was like working, baby, all that stuff. And I knew, and I was at a job that wasn't necessarily, where I wanted to be. And so for them to think about that experience that much, it was touching, man. It was a very touching. In fact, it got me tearing up now to think about it. So, but it was a touching experience. So I literally withdrew my application from all the other schools the next day. I offended some schools. You're like, who the hell are you to withdraw your application? But so back to the Yale piece, but it really helped me to see that you can do something that's creating economic value for for your local community, great community, and you could also do something that's creating societal value, right? And so that's a big part. That's what VMHA is, veteran mental health assessment. We're creating economic value for our veterans, psychologists, for those that are around our platform, but we're also creating social societal value because we're helping people to move forward in their journeys. We're helping them to recognize where they are, right? Because the first step in any condition is understand kind of where you're at, like whether it's anxiety, depression, PTSD, etc., and then being able to get treatment for that. But now you can make different choices, right? Now that you understand where you're at, and you can make choices to take care of your family, take care of yourself, and to be productive, right? And so that's what's behind VMHA. It's really about being able to not just create economic value, right? But it's also about societal value and being able to bring those two together. Because what we saw at the time was that they were separate, right? Or not everyone was winning, and the pie is big enough. Like we could, like there's a way we can all eat. If we can do what's right for people and for your business. And so that's I owe a lot to Yale for helping me see that.
So, and does the idea manifest itself like during that time when you're going to Yale, or is it after? Like, what are you sitting around talking to somebody, or be like, "Here's what's lacking." You know what I mean? Like, how does that?
Yeah. So, the idea of being a business owner was absolutely there while I was at Yale. In fact, there was a, oh, but let's back up. At the time, I was helping to build the Volvo subscription model. And so, which was their, nationwide kind of, instead of buying, leasing a car, you could subscribe to it from your phone, pick it up at a dealership. So I was on the ground floor building it out. And so that took a lot of my time. But, in spare time, I was thinking there was like an app I wanted to build specifically around, Kevin's wearing his dad life hat. It was around paternal involvement in pregnancy and beyond, right? So I'm, still it's still on my radar, so I won't give too much away, but there's a huge need for support for dads, right? And so a lot of us as dads, we tend to not be as involved in the pregnancy process, not because we don't want to, because we were taught not to, right? It's they go do their thing and one. I think that's changed a little bit, but there's research that shows that paternal involvement during pregnancy directly relates to paternal involvement and kind of connection post, right? And so that was the idea I was exploring at the time. And we ideated, we explored a bunch of things. And so um, and as I was doing research, I was doing surveys, talking to people. But the challenge was monetizing it. It was like, okay, this is great. There's a problem. How do I monetize it? And so it's one of those ideas that's still on my shelf right now, and I'm thinking about how to do that. But where VMHA came from was since Volvo, I was fortunate to join a global design innovation company called IDEO. And so I was able to learn a bunch of core skills around human centered design and design thinking, which is really about problem solving while keeping the human being at the center. Right. And so there's a bunch of different frames to use to look at that. You could use, data science, you can use, software, graphic design, communications, content, etc. But it's really about problem solving with the human being at the center. So I did that for a couple years or so, and then I took an executive role at Capital One. But what happened was that while I was doing that, my wife, who was a psychologist, she got a job at a startup, and so she was overseeing about 70 clinicians nationwide. So these are PhD level, PsyD level psychologists, and she was responsible for clinical quality, right? So making sure that they're doing the things and they're checking certain boxes and they're reporting things appropriately and making sure not missing things. And so she became very, very good at that capability. And so it just so happens that she started to do assessments for veterans, and that was our window in. Right? I had no idea this space existed. All I knew at the time was, oh, you file your VA claim, after you leave service, and whatever the VA gives you, you just take and you leave. And so I got my 10% for tinnitus when I first left, which is like standard issue for a lot of veterans when they first leave service. You get like your standard 10%. And so what we found out though, Mike, was that veterans are being denied incorrectly. Veterans are getting if they aren't being denied, the rating they get is lower than it should be. Many veterans are just not filing due to stigma, filing for mental health benefits due to stigma, or they think that what, their buddy over there, I'm not going to file because Kevin had it worse than me, right? And so I don't want to take Kevin's benefits, right? And so that's the logic, and so that's on that side, which is unfortunate because many of them, all of them that we've seen, with the exception of a small batch, have been impacted, and so now they're not getting benefits that could help them either get access to more compensation, which is necessary because of the fact that what their productivity isn't what it should be. They're not sleeping the way they should be sleeping. They're having issues with their partners, and so the compensation is actually helpful for them to get access to resources. Right. The flip side is when some veterans choose to go do that, you have folks who are charging veterans and like what feels like an arm and a leg for that kind of support. And so they're charging veterans $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 for getting, mental health claim support. And we're like, this is crazy. How are you going to charge that much? The veterans coming to you because they're saying, hey, I should be getting compensation. I should be getting benefits because I'm being impacted. And like, I think all of us on this call know that financial stability is a key social determinant of your ability to kind of maintain and function and move away from some of the extreme options that a human being could choose. And so Like, why would you want to take that much money from the veteran? Like that doesn't make sense to me. And so, but then what they also do is that they turn around and they pay the psychologist doing the assessment pennies on what they're charging the veteran. So they're gonna, they're charging veterans 5, 10, $20,000, paying the psychologist $150. And now you're creating this situation where the psychologist who's trying to take care of their family and trying to do the best they can, they're going to have to see 20, 30, 40, 50, however many veterans, and then they're they're going to get tired, right? They're going to cut corners. They're going to, and it's just natural. We're human beings. They're going to start making different choices than they would have made seeing the first veteran, right, versus seeing the 50th veteran, because they're getting paid not a sustainable wage. And so that's what we saw. And then once we saw that, unpacked it, Mike, it was like, you know what? There's a better way. We can build a better platform. Like, we can build a platform that actually gives veterans exactly what they need to get their benefits, and we can pay psychologists well. Like, we could actually do both. And so I'm proud to say that, from what my research is, that we pay our psychologists the best rate there is nationwide for the support, and we charge our veterans, from what I've seen, the best rate possible for the work that we provide for them. And a big way that allows us to do that is we built out a tech platform our first year that allows us to do a whole lot of quality control, optimize the psychologist experience, and a lot of that comes from my experience with technology, and innovation. So that's what we did to solve that problem. So that's the core of what VMHA is, but that idea started back in October of, or was it September of 2023, and then we literally said, let's launch a month, 2 months later, because this problem was near and dear enough to my heart, to be able to start executing on it.
Dwayne, I have a question for you, but we have
Please.
one in the chat that I think makes sense for this time. Chris Jackman wrote in, there's a lot of contention in the vet community about claim sharks. We know benefits issues are complicated. Do you cap the fees that you charge veterans? The Texas AG has an active lawsuit.
Yeah, no, that is a great question. And I did not know we were live. So this is excellent.
And by the way, Chris probably walked by your booth at some point during MCon, because Chris was there. Chris is like WTTA adjacent family.
Is that right?
So yeah, welcome, Chris. Thank you for asking that question. But yeah, he was at MCon.
Yeah.
So he's a
No,
supporter of the whole community.
that's excellent, Chris. That's a phenomenal question. And so there's a lot of issues right now with claim sharks. So what claim sharks are, there are people that are charging obscene fees to veterans for claim support. So not just mental health, but you got folks charging fees for physical. And so what these folks are not doing, and what we're doing, is that we charge a flat upfront fee. Right, we're transparent about that fee, so veterans know upfront, and we charge no back pay. What a lot of claim sharks end up doing is that they promise veterans, they say, hey, we'll do a contingent fee where you don't pay anything upfront, and we'll take, on the back end. Unfortunately, what some veterans don't realize is that that back end can work out to be a lot of money. And so it can either be, it's usually two options. It's either 5 to 6 times is the range I've seen of what their monthly increase will be. And so even if a veteran that's getting, let's say, zero, and now their monthly compensation is, let's say $4,000, and that claim shark is now saying, hey, we're going to help you get the $4,000 that you deserve based on how you've been impacted, and we're going to take 5 to 6 times that. Well, that's $24,000. So that seems unreasonable. Or they'll say, we're going to take 20%. I think the VA has capped it at 20% now. Some people did 25 or 30% in the past. 20% of your back pay. And so what the back pay is if you file your intent to file, let's say April of 2024, I filed it, and my claim just came through, April of 2025, and it was approved. Well, the VA says that, for that year, from when I first filed to now, I deserve back pay for that entire time. And so what some of these claim sharks will do is say, okay, we're going to take 20% of your back pay. Well, unfortunately, what the unsuspecting veteran doesn't realize is that that can be a lot of money, right? And so, yeah, they said free up front, but 20% of, let's use the same math. Let's say you're zero, now you're 4,000. 20% of that, 4,000 times 12, uh, what number is that? Is that 40, 48?
Come on, you
Uh,
went to Yale. I went to Arizona State. Stop. I'm not doing Arizona State math in front of the public. Yeah.
uh, uh, what number is that?
Come on, Kevin. What's the number? Quick math.
I wasn't paying attention to the blackboard.
Kevin went to University of Reno.
Oh man,
I was trusting the Yale education, thinking he was just going to nail it.
48,000.
Sounds right.
Yeah, 48,000. Yeah, so it's 48,000. Okay, so 48,000. And so now they're going to take 20% of that, assuming that it's just 4,000, right? Sometimes it could be longer than 1 year. It could be 2 years or 3 years. In which case that can be closer to 100,000. And so 20% of that fund. So that's what a lot of the claim shark legislation, of which the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, I'm a lifetime member. I'm a big supporter of that legislation because there's absolutely no reason for folks to be charging those types of fees for the kind of support that they're doing. And so I'm a believer that there's a way to be able to provide, a flat, upfront, transparent fee service that is also high quality, right? Because I think my issue is that, we're quick to take the veterans' money, but what are you doing to make sure your people are credentialed? What are you doing to make sure your people are executing well? What are you doing to make sure that the veteran is going to receive something that will actually be beneficial for them given to the VA? And if you can't answer those three questions, then you shouldn't be delivering any service for any fee to the veteran community. And so that's my perspective on it. And I've seen veterans have sent me documents that they've gotten from other folks where the psychologist they copy and pasted their information from another veteran, and like the name isn't right. And so, but again, that's economics, where the psychologist is being paid pennies, 100 to whatever. it's we're human beings. It's only natural. And so that's part of the reason that and I'm not blaming that psychologist per se, like, you shouldn't be in that situation. But that's the reason that we've created VMHA, because we said there needs to be a better way to deliver for our veterans and to deliver for psychologists, and to make sure we can actually give veterans what they need. And so every veteran gets a comprehensive mental health assessment, which means that there's no, you're not paying for a diagnosis. We're not guaranteeing you anything. What we are going to do, we're going to make sure that with our comprehensive mental health assessment, that we're going to be able to, if ethically appropriate, diagnose you, right? And so our approach is, we're not just writing a letter for you. You're going to sit down, you're going to give us your information, we're going to review your records, we're going to give you mental health screeners, nationally recognized mental health screeners that looks across trauma response, anxiety, depression, figure out what your qualitative, quantitative scores are, and then include that as evidence to then be able to appropriately diagnose. And then, only then, will we then, after having a diagnostic clinical interview, be able to provide a nexus that connects your condition to your service. And so what we don't do is, we're not the cookie cutter, hey, write me a letter group, and there's a space for that. Like, if you're a veteran who has recently left service, has a diagnosis that's there from your service, or has a condition that's there in your service, and you've been in treatment, I totally understand having your provider write a nexus statement that's been seeing you for some time. That makes sense, right? That makes a lot of sense. But for the veterans that you haven't, you don't have a diagnosis, and you haven't been in treatment for years, you've left service over 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, your condition may have progressed. And so what I recommend for any veteran is, don't I recognize that your benefits are important, and we want to get your benefits, but what's also important is recognizing what your actual condition is, so that you can take steps to be able to move forward your quality of life, right? And so how you do that is not just listen to your buddy that tells you, hey man, I think you got PTSD because you deployed with me, right? Like, that's not the right answer. Like, the right answer is, let's figure out what your actual diagnosis is, and then from there, let's figure out what your actual symptoms are, and let's get you what you need while also recommending treatment, which is our approach, and that's why a lot of folks come to us because they know that we're doing a comprehensive assessment and we give them the things they need for their benefits. And so that's what makes us a bit different. But I that was a phenomenal question. So thank you. Was that Chris that asked that question?
Yep, Chris.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dwayne, what was in those early moments of VMHA? How were you off based off all the experience and knowledge that you have now? Like when Mike first started, he tells the story of, oh, I thought I could raise money and help fund the solutions that already exist, and then he found out those didn't exist. What was maybe something like that in your journey?
Oh man, Kevin, that is a phenomenal question, man. I tell you, as an entrepreneur, it feels like you're just you're always learning. You're always learning, and so much of what you thought was true, sometimes it winds up like there's something clear there, but like not always the case. And so I'll tell you, one of the and I don't have a lot of regrets in this life, but one of the things that I didn't understand initially in marketing VMHA is that you know we didn't talk about we know that it's important to understand your diagnosis and those things. I still talk about that, but what a lot of veterans needed to understand, and for a lot of folks it was transactional, right? For me it wasn't transactional, it's still not transactional. For me it's about like love, care, and doing what's right for the community. But some veterans it's just, hey, can you, like, what's your success rate? Like, can you give me what I need? And so, and I had to be okay with the fact that for some people, that's all it is, right? That's not what it is for me, but for some veterans, that's what it is, and that's what they want to know. And so I have to be okay with communicating in that way for them because I still want to make sure they get their benefits if they've been impacted. But I have to suppress my own feelings of, hey man, like I want you to move forward in your journey, right? For them, it's about like, have been impacted, I want my compensation, and I have to be okay with that, right? And so for another group of veterans, it's about, I want to be a better father, I want to be a better mother, I've been impacted, I've snapped at my kids in a way, and I want to be better. And I love those folks because they're connecting on a deeper level, and I want to support them too because that's why we started the company. So we give them, each of them gets the same exact level of effort, right? Because everyone gets resources, everyone gets treatment recommendations, everyone gets a comprehensive assessment. But in terms of how I market it, I had to kind of suppress my own personal views and recognize that how I market this thing has to be specific to the folks I want to attract. And so now on the website, you'll see, I have there that shows how much benefits we unlocked per veteran, and so I speak to the financial side of it. Kevin, honestly, that wasn't something that I was thinking about marketing initially because we're so focused on, hey, our veteran-centered process is going to make sure that you get your benefits because you're going to get a psychologist that gets you. It's going to ask the right questions, give you the right evidence because we're looking at process, right? And so what the market taught me, and very quickly, was that what some folks care about process and some folks care about outcome. You got to be okay with that. So that's one. Two, we had a partner initially that we it was helpful because it helped kind of refer a lot of veterans to us, right? But the challenge with that is that, as we know, is that when you have a partner that's referring veterans, they had price power, right? And so that became operationally challenging because they were forcing me into the situation where I wasn't able to have margins to reinvest into my business so that I can build out my software to produce high quality work. So there was pressure that was put on me from this partner. And one of the things that I wish I would have recognized sooner was being able to diversify away from that partner earlier so that we're in a good spot now. We figured out our marketing strategy, but a big piece of our handicap not figuring out, oh, we need to market this differently, was that we had all these veterans coming to us from this partner, but that wasn't operationally, it wasn't operationally good margin business for us. So once we separate from that partner, it gave us the ability to focus in on being able to deliver the way that we know we need to deliver, and create a healthier business for us and for the veteran. And so, uh, phenomenal question, excellent question.
Kevin, anything to add to that? By the way, Chris, I don't know if you could see it, Dwayne, but he said, great answer, Dwayne. There's has to be a middle ground that balances veteran choice, especially with no back pay that aligns with what accredited attorneys can do and support for the accurate CNP exams nexus.
Excellent. Thanks,
Yeah.
Chris. That's right. In fact, so what I'm proud of too, we had one of my most recent clients, a VA accredited attorney, referred them to us. I was like, hey, how do you hear of us? He's like, oh, the blah 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 law firm. I was like, oh, that's nice. That's nice. So the people in the community are now sending folks my way just based on, I think, our traction and what they know about the work that we do.
Do you find yourself, I mean, the claim shark term, is that something that, like you obviously recognize what he was talking about? You know what I mean? Is that something
Yeah.
that you have to constantly avoid or like, you know, fight? Do people look at you and say, "Oh, just another claim shark"?
Oh man, I yes, I've heard that, and so and oh man, and that frustrates the hell out of me, because the people that do that a lot of times, they don't understand enough about us, what we're doing, or enough about the landscape. And so I've been in meetings, Mike, where I've been trying to I've been in meetings with like a host of veterans, and I've had people speak nastily to me, say certain things, cut me off, and I gotta, as a founder for something you believe in, you gotta rise above, right? And so I have risen above so much crap over this last year and a half that maybe you understand, actually, because you asked that question.
I do
Um,
understand.
yeah.
Because I know exactly what they, when I first, it's a lot easier now being here for
Yeah.
6 years. But in the beginning of Walk Talk America, my people, the gun culture, would easily walk by my booth and dismiss me as just another front of someone who's trying to take guns.
Yeah.
Because they had never seen it from our side. They had, you always got some of the messages are the same, right? Like responsible gun ownership, like store your
Yep.
guns securely, like those type of things. And Brady and Everytown and Giffords can have those same messages, right? But they're not me. They don't have the same belief in the 2A rights that I do. But
That's
people
right.
would just see guns and mental health together, and just go, okay, I already made my decision about this guy. I'm not even going to talk to him and see what he
That's right.
believes. I'm not going to ask him if he believes in red flag laws, which is hell no, I do not. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like,
Yep.
so I would assume that you get it a lot, right?
I do. I do. And now, at first, I used to get it, and I'd be like, I just kind of, like, that's unfortunate. And now I actually asked them a question, because, but before I just kind of say like, hey, this is what I have to take. I have to take it for the company. And now I try to engage with them, because because there's so many stories that I have about veterans who we've helped, who need our service, and yet you point the finger at me, and you're like, oh, you claim shark, blah blah blah. You just don't, like, what makes you think that? What makes a claim shark? Do you understand what that actually is? And so, it's a lot of ignorance, but it's also change, right? Like, you're driving change that didn't exist at the time. And so, and I believe that our organization is needed for this moment. But it's a big change in terms of how we think about compensation, both in terms of the veteran and for the psychologist, and in terms of our structure, right? So there's no one that's doing what we're doing the way we're doing it. And I think a lot of folks have a hard time thinking that, right? They're like, oh, you're not just taking veterans. No, I'm not. I'm actually not. Like, if you look
Yeah.
at what we're doing, if you look at our reviews, look what we're delivering. We're actually delivering for our veteran community. I'm happy to engage in a conversation. The hardest part for me is people not wanting to engage in a conversation, right? It's like, like let's talk about it. Like let's be adults and talk about it. But you're gonna pass um judgment on me without at least giving me an opportunity to hear my perspective. Like that's not healthy. That's not
Yeah, and in defense to them, they've ran into a lot of claim sharks, right? Like,
right.
and that's a lot of charlatans screwed up for everybody else, and
Yeah,
then especially veterans, right? Because I mean, I look at the veteran community, and I know the ones that I've talked to that have been like, say, burned by the
yeah,
VA, they're done. I mean, they're not going back to the VA to see if they've improved or gotten better or changed a
yeah.
policy. They're just like, no, and absolutely not. And now they're telling other veterans, absolutely not. Do not
That's
trust
right.
the VA. Do not go to the VA. So it just seems like you've been burned before, and then it just becomes a thing, right? And it's hard to navigate to say like I'm different. And Kevin and I have to deal with that all the time. Do not see guns and mental health and think that we are one of them. We are completely different than the people that are usually out there preaching responsible gun ownership, mental health, all
Yeah,
those things. Like we do not believe in any restriction of any type. We are fully supportive of the Second Amendment, and that's it. Period. And when people actually do take time to stop by the booth, um, they get it. But I know a lot of people don't stop by the booth, and they probably tell
yeah.
their whoever they're with at that time, yeah, that's just another front to try to get you on a list and take your guns. And it's like, no, it's not. You know what I mean? We're something totally unique. So I feel your pain there. And Chris says, or burned by a VSO that didn't handle their benefits claim in a professional manner.
That's right. That's right. No, great point, Chris. No, there's and a lot of veterans have been burnt in the past, and veterans are a vulnerable population, right? Like there's so many veterans, there are a lot of you got the claim sharks, you got the folks, the scammers. You got a lot of scammers out there that prey on veterans for that reason. So, um, if I take myself out my shoes for a moment and just think about that, I guess we do need people to make sure we're protecting our veteran population to against scammers, sharks, those things. And Chris is right. Unfortunately, they're not all VSOs are created equal. I happen to know some great ones personally, and I also know there's some folks that shouldn't be doing it. And that's everything, right? Like there you got some great teachers, some great police officers, you got some great, business people out there. You got a lot of great people in different functions. And you got the bottom of the barrel. It's like maybe it's time to take a new role, right? So that exists in all kind of facets of life. However, what's challenging about this that when it comes to the VSOs, that they have a direct impact on that veteran's ability to get their benefits, right? And we don't want a veteran being denied because a VSO either told them not to get benefits because they looked at their background and thought they didn't rate it, which happens. I've heard that story. Um, or VSO just didn't file it properly or didn't, follow through. So I've heard that story too. But I'm an optimist, and so I'm a believer that there are more great people in the world than there are bad people in the world. And so I'm a believer that there are. I'm optimistic there are more great VSOs out there, and we just need to be able to kind of spotlight those folks and try to find a way to get some of the folks out the game as much as we can.
Yeah, and on that note, like what how does obviously you're at MCon, you were there, you know, displaying everything that you do. Like how do you get people to A, find you, and then B, understand that you're not the average claim shark out there? Like you're
Yeah,
not that guy, right? Like how challenging is that? Because we talked about this before the show, and I kind of want to, and that's a good segue to get into it too, is just like there are so many veteran organizations out there.
yeah,
It's ridiculous. Like it really is. And I get frustrated with it sometimes because I'm like, why are we failing this community so bad? Because there's one Walk the Talk America in gun world, right?
mhm,
There's when I go up to a booth and I'm trying to get a gun company, gun manufacturer, accessory manufacturer to support what I do, a lot of them are like, we already do this, and it's always a veteran group.
mm,
You know what I mean? And I'm
mhm,
always like, listen, veterans need the help. I'm not here to knock that. I'm not here to knock that. But don't forget about all the other customers, the other gun
yes,
owners, right? it's all a Venn diagram, and we all fall under gun lover,
That's right.
right? But how do you kind of like, and what's your view on that? Like, there's so many damn groups. How do people find the good ones, and how do you
Yeah.
weed through it?
I man, this is something that I'm a collaborator, Mike. Like I'm a like, and I believe that we are stronger together, right? And when we first started VMHA, I reached out to a whole bunch of folks in the space, people that even did similar work that what I did, trying to reach out to have a conversation to find ways that if we can collaborate, because like the pie is big enough, right? We don't have to have a mindset that, oh, I need to have if if you can't have anything from my rice bowl, because if you touch my rice bowl, then that's less rice for me. But actually, like, we can actually share, and we can actually collaborate and actually make a bigger bowl, right? Or sort of bigger pie. And so that's my perspective. Unfortunately, I've seen, and this is a thing that I've seen in a not-profit space, from a lot of folks in the veteran community. It's very, no, what's mine is mine, and focus on mine. And I think that's probably a function of, grant funding, and there's some, the way that many nonprofits raise funds, maybe drive some of that mindset to be able to kind of, to be very separate in terms of how they operate, right? Like, and this might be a very overly simplistic perspective on it, but for us, like, we drive, like, our business model is we're attracting customers who like our offering, who are willing to pay us, or we're attracting, partners who recognize our offering, who can refer folks to us. And so I'm happy with another person in this space doing the right thing, delivering for veterans, doing well. I'm happy with that. Like, in fact, if I can support them in terms of what they're doing, that that only helps to serve the veteran community and the greater community, right? Like, for example, we've built a capability of being able to provide high quality virtual mental health assessments. Well, we're pointing at the veteran community first because we know that's a community that needs this service. And we have ambitions to be able to do this beyond the veteran community, being able to provide high quality virtual mental health assessments. And so that's our long term strategy to be able to do that. And so for us, it's all about build capability and then broaden the aperture. You got to build capability, build brand first. And so that's our strategy. That's what we're doing. I think a lot of folks just you know they're also doing what they've been taught, right? So the person before them, it was like, oh, we got to do this, and we got to make sure we take care of ourselves. And so I think I've seen a lot of that in the veteran community. In fact, there's a lot of nonprofits who I've reached out to. It's like, no, they just don't. Maybe they're bogged down. Maybe they just don't have the space to think about it. But I've seen that too much, unfortunately, which has been hard for collaboration. And I think it makes it hard for veterans to know, where the hell do you go, right? You got a bunch of places with like 20,000 links from their
Right.
resources page, and it's like,
Yep.
which one do I choose, right?
Yeah.
I've got
Which
like
one
six.
speaks to me? Yeah. Like,
That's right.
yeah.
That's right. I've got like six. I got six. And you all are up there because I know that you all are providing a unique perspective and value that's important to me and important to my community. And so we have a very curated list of folks on our resources page. So I think there's a need for us to collaborate more, talk about what we can do well, right? Because we all can't do everything well, and that's okay. Like, there's certain things that my I'm not doing assessments, like my psychologists do the assessments, because that's their function, that's their capability. That's not my job, and I'm okay with that. And they're 100 times better at that than I am, and I'm okay with that. I think there's a recognition that we have to have about what we do well, what other folks can do well, and how we can collaborate. And I think once we could start doing that, I think it opens up a lot more opportunities for us.
No, absolutely. And so we met, and then we exchanged emails, had a phone call, and just life got in the way. We got,
Yeah.
super busy. We were scheduled out. And then I was thinking about you, and then randomly this email came through talking about your partnership with the Purple Heart Foundation. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, I got to get Dwayne on. Like I actually got to just do it. Right. So that's why I reached out. But like, obviously you partnered with Purple Heart Foundation. What does that look like to the listener? Like,
Yeah.
when you
Well,
say,
I mean, first off, shout out to Purple Heart Foundation, Jim Hash, the rest of the team. They're a phenomenal team. I remember when we were first introduced. Actually, one of my shout out to one of my employees at the time, Hannah Sanders. She connected me to Jim. I told her I would do that in the future, so I hope she listens to this and see that I actually did follow through on that. So she connected me to Jim, and Jim and I had great conversation about who we are, and he asked some tough questions because of um, what's some known bad actors in the space. And I remember I spoke to the board, and that was it was a really great conversation. Just folks that really understand the veteran experience and veteran challenges. And so I'm thrilled that that we have decided to become partners. And what that is for right now, we're focused on joint programming. We're still kind of ideating what that looks like, but for now it's about us being able to, they recommend, and us as a Purple Heart um, uh, uh, foundation business partner. We're on the website and whatnot. They send it out to their folks in their kind of directory. And so that's good. That's great for us because that shows the heart and the soul of VMHA, right? Purple Heart's an organization that I think is, everyone would agree, is aligned with the heart and soul of taking care of our wounded and impacted military. And that's the heart and soul of VMHA. So many of the wounds that our military faces are, they're not visible wounds, right? Right. And so and let's acknowledge that, and we can't move forward until we acknowledge that. So I think the Purple Heart Foundation is helping us to do that, and I'm thrilled about that partnership, and our plans to grow that, and to support them as they support us. So really excited about that.
So we kind of touched on it. Mental health is talked about more publicly than it ever has before in the history. We have probably more veteran groups than we ever have in the history of things. How are we missing, and what are the opportunities to
Mm,
improve as a society and a nation as a whole? Not maybe our own organizations, but
yeah.
what are we missing with this? We have so much talk and focus around it, yet we still don't seem to make a huge impact.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Kevin. So I have a few perspectives on that. In America, there's, what I think the stat is 1 in 5 Americans face a mental health challenge annually, right? And so that's a most recent stat. We also know that in terms of economic impact, there's a recent study that showed that mental health impacts about $280 billion GDP annually in terms of impact there. And so there's a lot that needs to be done on the mental health side. And the impact being lost productivity, absenteeism, folks not going for certain jobs, things of that nature. So there's a lot of really great, significant economic impact mental health. And so being able to just have the conversation is progress, right? And so I know it always feels like we're not making enough progress as quickly, and I'm with you. Like, we need to make more progress faster and yesterday. And the fact that we're now talking about it as much, like, I'm thrilled about that, because I just spoke to a potential client yesterday, this woman that was in the military back in the late 90s. And she's coming up with something now, that how she was impacted. And she said, I couldn't talk about this then, right? Like, it wasn't something that was okay. And now in 2025, she's like, you know what, I'm my friends, my colleagues, my former servicemen, my former fellow service members and veterans are saying, no, it's, you should go talk about this. Like, no, go share this, get benefits for it. And so that progress, I think, is helpful. I think as we a couple challenges that I've seen, and things that we need to tweak, right? Both on the national side and on the veteran side. I'll take the national side first. I think there's a lot of ways to recognize maybe some symptoms and whatnot, but it's really important to make sure that and I know that there's somewhere out there right now, there's someone building an AI solution to be able to solve this challenge, right? And good on them. But we 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 can't completely rely on technology to solve this, right? We have to take a clinician-led, tech-enabled approach to be able to ensure that we're recognizing where people are, diagnosing accurately, and then providing treatment recommendations, right? Just being able to diagnose without the treatment quick follow-up, that has been a disconnect. There's a study that came out just this last couple years. I'll follow up with it, but it shows that a lot of corporations are doing work to be able to give people mental health screeners, and the screeners are helpful. But then what next? Right, how do we connect the screener to action, right, and recommendation for that individual, and ensure that that recommendation is clinically appropriate for their situation. And so that's the gap that I'm seeing right now. I think a bunch of folks are seeing right now nationally, that we need to kind of hone in on. And so the talk is great, that's important, but we need to get people as early as possible to where they are when they're experiencing a condition, and then being able to make recommendations for their treatment moving forward. More people than not, once they have recognition of where they are with accurate, appropriate treatment, will move forward, right? So that's the national side. On the veteran side, one of the big challenges I see is that we're forcing veterans to to self-select into mental health treatment, right? Or to mental health benefits. We're saying, hey, file a claim for this. Why are we doing that? Why don't we automatically give every veteran a mental health assessment, or every service member once they're leaving service, then give them another assessment within the next year or 2 years or 3 years to check and see where they are? Because if we take the stigma away, right, and we recognize that every single one of us could be going through something at any point in our lives, right? And we give them an assessment. We say, okay, this is where you're at now. We recommend this. Check you again, year, 2 years. Okay, good. We're in a better place. Good. You don't need that compensation anymore, because only 5% of mental health conditions are actually, that level of severity. Now you move forward, which is amazing. We're going to adjust your benefits to this level. And so I want to flip it on its head. Instead of forcing veterans to have to file for it, give everyone an assessment once they're leaving, check and see where they are. Yes, it will cost us more upfront, but it'll save us so much more in the back end, right? And so that's a big piece about what I'm seeing, where we're missing a gap for veterans, for mental health.
Yeah, it seems you said something earlier during your time. You were trained to be a warrior, and then at the end, you're kind of dropped off in civilization, not being lost, your identity lacking, to where there could be a lot of missing pieces of just,
That's right.
all right, after your service is done, let's give you the skills or the pipeline or things to reintegrate back to society when you're not necessarily a warrior, just stepping off the boat or the plane when you're done.
Yeah, that was Kevin, every time like people talk about that, it just reminds me of my time at the White House. That was, yes, everybody knows that's my humble brag. I got to the White House. No, but and Dwayne, I think I told you this at the show. I may have, I may have not. I told somebody at MCOM, but like when I was up there and I realized that I was the only person from the firearms industry, and we had to give these little short TED talks. I said, um, the firearms industry can help you with veteran suicide. You just can't make us a villain anymore. And I remember sitting down, and then one of the gentlemen that was, because there's 30 people at a table, and then there was 100 people around us, right? And
Yeah,
one highly decorated person, because he had all the medals.
yeah,
He looked like Maurice Starr or Captain Crunch or Michael Jackson when they were walking around. It made no sense why they had so many medals. But he literally like says, "Listen to this guy," and he goes on and gives this very powerful speech that like I said, it looked like I paid him. But he just said, you sent me over there with a firearm, and my rifle, you had me name it, you had me kill with it, and I did
yep.
that, and I did it great. I was really good at it. And I come back after I serve you, and you have no purpose for me, and I start going through hard times, and then the first thing you want to do is take away the thing you told me to name and made part of my identity.
That's right.
That's all I needed. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it was just like, and then everybody in that room treated me completely different from that point on, because he was like, listen to that guy.
that's
Yeah.
right.
So,
And you know what? Like some of the most relaxing time I've had has been shooting. Like just based on and I think a lot of veterans could, and maybe a lot of shooters, like forget being a veteran, like shooting, in controlled environments, right? It can be like you get you're getting your breath right, right? You're focusing on the target. you're ensuring the fundamentals are in the right place, you're holding the weapon the right way, and when you're relaxing your body. And so there's a method, there's a natural kind of flow that goes with that. And then you get used to it, right? You've been trained to do this thing over and over and over again. You get pretty good at pistol and rifle or whatever else you're taught on, and that becomes part of your life, right? That becomes part of your life. And quite frankly, for a lot of folks in the military, like I remember being made fun of when because I was a pizza box. That's what I had when I was first in TBS, which means I was a marksman. So that means I qualified, but like not at a high level. And so then you're also evaluated as to how good you can do that thing, right? And so it's institutional. It's a big part of who you are. Um, and the like once I became, once that connection came there, like I just it's a part of you, right? I taught my wife how to shoot. Like she quick story. We were in Virginia Beach really quickly. Was it Virginia Beach? I think so. I was at a school and she was on the line and she was shooting and the entire line stopped and looked down and they looked at me and they're like, listen, don't don't mess with her.
That's awesome.
Because she was getting like remarkable effects on target, right? And so
Mm.
but like there's no reason that we should make guns oppositional to mental health, right? There's absolutely no reason. In fact, my Frisco VFW chapter, every Wednesday, they go shooting. A lot of folks go shooting at the gun range at the Frisco Gun Club, like, and that's a great thing because we're still building community, right? And we're helping veterans to do things that they enjoy doing, right? And we're helping them to kind of come together. And if someone's having an issue, you're able to spot it, you're able to know about it, you're able to talk about it, right? And
Mm.
so, like, let's stop making like the answer isn't no guns. No, the answer is let's figure out how to help people with their mental health, right? Like that's the answer. So I'm with you 100%.
Well, I know you are because that's why we get along so well. Like I was like, I wish everybody was like Dwayne when they walk up to the booth because like he came up and got it very fast. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we discussed having people walk by and make judgment calls or whatever, but you were like, "What's this?" And then I was just told you real fast. You're like, "Yes." So yeah, it is to me like because believe it or not, I've been on so many ranges and shoot, and I agree with you when you're shooting you're it's not like you there are things that I do where I'm actually reading when I'm reading I'm thinking about other stuff. That's why I hate reading sometimes because I'm like, damn, I got to read the whole page over again because I didn't comprehend a damn thing it said. I read the words, but I was thinking about the
That's
fight I
right.
got in with my wife, right? Like or something like that. But like when I was playing basketball, like before I got old and things started to fall apart on me, like when I was playing basketball, I could be going through the worst thing in my life, but I was so focused on
That's right.
what was happening in that court. And I think that shooting is the exact same thing because when you're out there, you have to focus, you have to breathe. It can be, traumatizing for some people. Like once they have to get used to it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
not easy to when that first bang goes off. You watch people flinch and stuff like that. Like your brain says, pay attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this isn't a game. You know what I mean? So I do think lead therapy is a real thing. And I think that a lot of people that don't understand, um, they don't realize it, that this is important to a veteran. It's just a way that they get, I have anxiety. I had anxiety this morning. I went to the range and shot off 1,000 rounds and I feel much better. I'm much more calm. Like that
Right.
is normal. There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, what I love, I get a lot of folks in law enforcement or ex law enforcement. They come to me because they're like, "We love the fact that you get it. Like we're gonna come get our assessment from you because we're gonna say some real stuff to your psychologist, and we know your psychologist isn't gonna run and call someone to come to our house because and so they need someone to go to where they can trust. Now, if you're at risk of hurting yourself, and then that's a different story. But outside of that, or someone else, but outside of that, like yeah, like my psychologists are able to recognize and know like what our community like our appreciation of guns and shooting and that kind of thing. And also sometimes some folks have seen some dark things and based on what you've seen, that's also a reality for you, and you're working through that, and that's also okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Clover text in the chat. If you're doing it right, once you get it on target, nothing in the world exists.
But you and
Yeah,
that
you
target.
and that target. Yeah, it's
That's right.
that. Yeah, I can honestly say every time that I've been on the line, I've never ever thought about anything else but what I was doing there, whether it was instructing somebody, giving
Yeah.
them pointers, or just focusing. So it's I think people underestimate the power of that. Um, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But all right, man, I think this is a good time for us to kind of wind down. You've been the guest I knew you would be. So, I really appreciate you coming on this show. I have one final question for you, but is there anything else you want to put out there right now just about the organization? Um,
I mean, I'll say this has been a remarkable experience. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, and so a lot of times I go on podcasts and I get questions and things to prep for, and you were just like, "Hey, man, we'll just kind of flow and whatnot." I can tell you, this is one of the best times I've had on a podcast. Like it's just been easy, free flowing. I appreciate the live questions like during the time. The one thing I will say, and I wouldn't be a good founder if I didn't, in terms of making sure I provide kind of a final note for VMHA, is that one of the things that I've seen over the last year and a half, I've had the joy of speaking to probably close to 600, a lot of veterans at this point, like very, very high number of veterans. And one of the things that, whether they're Vietnam era or they've came back from Afghanistan, or Desert Storm, anything in between, you know one of the one regret that every single one of them has, that's filing their claim or going through the process, is that they wished they would have done it sooner. That's the one thing, right? And so, what I tell veterans is, what I part of the listeners at this moment is, you know don't put it off. Like if it's something that you're thinking about doing, just do it. Right? Don't settle for where you are. Don't make justifications for where you think you should be or who should deserve it more than you. If you've been impacted, you deserve it. Just do it. And so, I'll leave. That's my final note.
that's awesome. That's beautiful. All right, so you work in this space, uh, but how do you tend to your mental health?
Oh man. Oh man. Um Man, so I had a doctor's appointment at the end of the year, my annual, and my doctor was like, "Hey, how's your mental health?" And I was like, I'll be honest with you, I'm going kind of hard right now. Yeah, so, and so I'll be honest, my mental health is not as great as it normally is. I'm not working out as much, like my 5 times a week as I normally would. And so I had an honest conversation with him, because I was doing weekends, early mornings because my tech team's in India. And then long days and evenings after the kids go to sleep. And so, we had an honest conversation about the fact that, all right, well, what changes can you make? Right. And so I said, okay, well, I need to make sure I might not be able to go for the crushing workout I normally would, in the morning, but maybe I go for a walk, and I think through something. And I dedicate, at least 40 minutes for that a day while I think through or talk to someone on the phone. And so I've been doing that a lot more because my lifestyle is just a little different now that we're building the company. I have the Calm app, which is a mindfulness platform, and so I've been better about getting back to mindfulness and doing that a bit more. So I did that. And there was a point in time I was doing that every day, and I'm working on doing that again. I did it yesterday. My goal is to do it again today. And so now, with this new shift or not new, this shift of kind of building this company, I've had to make some adjustments to myself and what I'm doing, because I got to make sure I can preserve myself so that I can then be here for not just the veterans and my psychology, but my family, right? And so I'm no good if I'm not operating optimally. So right now I'm doing mindfulness. I'm walking a lot more. I'm trying to take breaks at the end of the day a bit more, so I'm not trying to be always on. Like I thought I would have to be. I've hired a full time person that's doing more of the operational role, so that's giving me a lot more space now, so I could breathe a bit. And so those are the key ways, Mike, that I'm doing to take care of my mental health. I'm trying to unplug, to tap into my family a bit more, and have happy moments. And so, but that's an active thing that I'm working on right now to make sure that I can get back to balance and equilibrium. But that's a place I wasn't in a balanced place in the end of the year, and I'm grateful now that I've made some adjustments. My blood pressure is back in control, because I've made adjustments. And so, but get hey, listeners, get your annual, and be honest with your doctors, because with your honesty with your doctors, they can help you. You can, and reflects back where you are, so that you can make changes. And so that's a great question, Mike. Excellent question.
No, it's a great answer. We never they're never the same, and it's always fascinating to hear them. But Kevin, you have anything else to wrap up? Are you good? Okay. Well, how do people get a hold of you? Obviously, plug the website, any social media you might have.
Look at that. VMHAforvets.com is the website. So please feel free to go there. You want to email us, that's info@vmhaforvets.com. You can find us on YouTube at VMHA for Vets, also LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram. Same kind of hook there, VMHAforvets.com. So that's how you find me. We're there. Thrilled to be on the show, and even more excited to continue to drive real change in our veteran and larger mental health community.
Awesome. Well, that does it for today, folks. Thank you for everybody who's in the chat and watching it live. I want to thank all of our sponsors, everybody that makes this possible. And until next time, we wish you all better mental wellness. Thank you.